Hey guys, Jeremy here from menzagaming.net, bringing you today what I really would have hoped would have been an analysis of the March FAQ. And of course, as we know, that has now become the Spring FAQ. It's been delayed after Adepticon. And I wanted to make a video today to discuss some of the issues I have with the new FAQ system, especially after the fact that we've now kind of had this delay. And I just want to preface this as well by saying that I'm a massive supporter of kind of new GW. I think that a GW community that is interacting with the 40K community and the AOS community and things like that, that's amazing, right? It's way better than it used to be when we had no interaction and we had to have institutions kind of creating their own FAQs that sometimes kind of conflicted with each other. We're in a way better spot now. But just because we can all agree that GW has made amazing steps forward does not mean that they're immune to criticism and that everything they do is perfect. And I think that it's a disturbing amount of people post comments kind of implying that we cannot criticize GW and we cannot give constructive feedback because they've kind of earned this immunity via their positive contributions to the community lately. I think that's a terrible attitude to have. And I, by no means do I think that we should go after them and try to attack GW and go on the offensive. But I think we can certainly say, look, these are some issues that have come up. We don't know how, maybe we could do this in a better way. Maybe going forward, this could be adjusted. So I think you have to kind of draw a line between constructive criticism, and obviously, and just slander and attacks and things like that. But we also don't want to be kind of sycophants where we just kind of, doesn't matter what GW do, as long as they're doing it under the guise of the new GW, we should just, buy whatever they sell us. I think there has to be a middle ground, and it's important that people feel empowered enough to criticize where it's necessary. So that leads me to the start of the video, where I wanted to kind of mention and draw some parallels between the current paradigm with the FAQs and the chapter approved to a system that existed in Australia for a couple of years called Community Comp. And a lot of kind of Europeans and Americans watching this video may have actually heard of Community Comp. There were people in Europe, especially in Northern Europe, there were some communities using Community Comp. And a Community Comp in 7th edition was effectively kind of like an overlay that introduced a credit system. And those credits were used to purchase units and upgrades and warlord traits and things like that. That basically allowed the Community Comp system to cost really strong things. And by using that credit system, it was basically functioned very similarly to the way in which the current FAQ is functioning. It kind of curbed the power on overly strong units, and units that were relatively weak became stronger because the strong units in the meta were kind of comped, so to speak. So Community Comp's a great parallel to draw with the current FAQ system. And as a result, I think I can speak from experience because I was part of that Australian Community Comp scene when it was being played out. I played for a couple of years in that system, and I also, for a while, was part of the Community Comp team that was actually doing the compings. So there are a lot of parallels there. The problem with Community Comp and a resultant problem with the current FAQ system is that it comes across as a very punitive system. That means that when you do well with something, when there's a certain list that's having success, it can get nerfed, and that kind of results in a bad feeling. When someone, I think the best example to use would be Matt Root with his Flyrants at Adepticon, and when you win a tournament with a list that, and by no means is Flyrants, was Matt Root the only person running Flyrants. Flyrants have been pretty popular in the European scene. Flyrants were starting to come out, around the time of LVO. People were starting to take them. But the fact that Matt Root had so much success, adjusted a list to a specific metagame, obviously he's been congratulated. Obviously everyone's kind of said, well done, Matt, great job. But there's this kind of almost like a meme, like a laughter kind of in the air, a sense of amusement that, oh, well, now you're going to get nerfed. I hope you enjoyed your one tournament with your Flyrants because now they're going to get smashed, right? And that creates a bad feeling because you kind of think, well, if I start having a lot of success with this list, especially at one of the big events, like, for example, Adepticon or the LVO or the Bay Area Open or whatever, and I win, then I'm probably going to get nerfed. And the same thing can be said for the Poxwalker farm style list that Nick Nanavati took and that many people have been taking, especially down in the local Australian meta. We've had a lot of people using that kind of list as well to great success. So by no means should we not necessarily curb the power of the top lists, but the problem with such a responsive type of system is it creates a sense of, rather than being rewarded for my success and being praised for success, you get punished. And that just isn't a great thing to have. The other problem is it's very reactive. So these kind of FAQs obviously require data and require sample sizes in order to be able to react. And when they do that, it creates a situation where the good players that are aware of this already moving forward, right? Like someone like Matt Root, and I'm using Matt Root obviously because he won Adepticon. He's probably already thinking of the next list to play. He's not emotionally tying himself to Hive Tyrants, and he's probably not even investing in that sense of, well, these models are going to, serve me well, and I'm going to start adjusting my Tyranid list to be able to deal with adjustments in the meta, because he knows he's probably just going to get slammed by the FAQ. So, it's not about the natural meta, it's about the fact that he's being kind of synthetically nerfed. And that leads to my next point, which is that these kind of FAQ systems, such as Community Comp or the modern FAQ in 8th edition, it stymies a natural meta progression. And the best example that I can use here is the fact that around the time of LVO, Dark Reapers and Eldar in general were an amazing meta list, right? I personally had a great amount of success with Ynnari. I won the CanCon tournament with them. But having said that, I knew around the time of me playing that list and creating that list that I was very weak to Tyranids. I lost in the Oz Masters tournament. I lost a game to Simon Gokovic, who some of you might know is a prominent member of the Australian community. And I also lost to him again in CanCon. He was the only opponent that beat me in CanCon. So I was aware of how strong Tyranids were against Eldar. And when I constructed my list, tried to proof myself a little bit. And even now, like, the adjustments I've made to my Eldar list, it's difficult to beat Nids. So we could see that the beauty of the natural meta progression from between LVO and Adepticon, where a lot of players were realizing how strong Tyranids were against Eldar. It came into the meta. People started to realize it. And then a beautiful kind of illustration of what happened was what happened with Nick Nanavati. Nick Nanavati knew that there was a marker on his head. He knew that people were going after that list archetype that he won LVO with. As a result, he pivoted, right? He's like, well, I can't invest in this. People are taking the things that are good against me. There's a lot of Tyranids. Maybe there's a lot of, Bloodletter Bombs, other kind of things that are good versus Eldar. So you know what? I'm going to move to something else. And that's a really amazing, what to me makes competitive gaming really fun to play, is the meta game. Not just the game you turn up and play on any given Sunday. It's all the psychology that happens in the days, weeks, months between big tournaments. And the problem with an FAQ is it stymies that natural meta progression, because there's this kind of influencer, this hand that's coming in, this like invisible hand is coming in and changing the power of units that should be able to naturally combat each other. And that's why I feel like it's a shame that the FAQs have been so heavy-handed, and some of the points adjustments in something like Chapter Approved have been so, in some situations, so drastic. And the problem with this invisible hand is that it rewards low-level decision-making and complaints. Because normally, in a game like this, with a robust metagame, people that can think outside of the box and that can come up with really creative ways to deal with a problem, they get rewarded. Now, in the case of dealing with the Eldar Ynnari list, of course, taking lots of Flyer Ants or taking lots of Assault from Deep Strike type of units, that's a kind of a nice way to deal with it. Kind of obvious way to deal with it. But sometimes some people are coming up with a lot more nuanced, a lot more kind of complex and hard to see counters. And that's a really cool thing. And the problem with the FAQ is it kind of rewards people that don't want to engage in that. They don't want to open up their codexes and look for answers. They don't want to think. They just want to complain. So instead of spending an hour or two with their friends trying to work out a way how to beat Eldar, they open up their emails and they send GW a scathing email. So I feel like being so heavy-handed via FAQs is rewarding the latter people I've described, and punishing the people that are being more creative and that are using the full spectrum of their skill set to win games. So that's my kind of issues with the way in which the FAQs are being implemented. And as I said, that comes from a lot of experience with the community comp system. And I'm seeing a lot of parallels, the way in which people are interacting, the kind of a bit of the angst and the fear and the trepidation. And I think the best word to use is kind of trepidation or anxiety. That's something that was with us the whole time in community comp, where you always felt this cloud looming over you because you knew at any point, not at any point, obviously at the nerf intervals, you could get hit. So there was this kind of this sense of not feeling it like you could ever fully invest in an army and feel like you could get 6 months, a year or more out of it. Now I'm going to kind of talk briefly about the problems with the specific situation with what's happened, how the FAQ's been delayed. So it's gone from being what was a March FAQ, which was eligible to come out from the 1st of March, to now right at the end of March, we're being told, well, actually, it's going to be a spring FAQ. So, I mean, why is that a problem? I don't think it's a problem because it's late. That's not what the problem is as such, right? The fact that it might be a week late, that isn't really the issue, okay? Like, that obviously can be annoying for some people that are really anxious to see it, but that's not the problem with why I'm complaining about the timing of it. So, the biggest problem, one of the major issues with it, is that it happens straight after Adepticon. Now, in many ways you could say, well, that's expected, right? We were anticipating that the FAQ was going to drop after Adepticon so that it didn't disrupt the preparation for that tournament and didn't put the TOs in an awkward position regarding rulings. So it makes sense it's going to drop after Adepticon. But why is it now going to take potentially up to or more than a month to come out after that tournament? And I think the obvious reason is because GW are computing the data from Adepticon and incorporating that into their FAQ. And as you can see in my little note there, that's a problem for me because it implies that the Adepticon results are a surprise to GW. Now, I have a problem with that because Tyranid, Hive Tyrant Spam, or Poxwalker Farm, neither of those things should have been a surprise to GW. Those are things that were at the top of the meta. These are lists that were being used in top European tournaments, and Europe is generally considered the most competitive and robust scene of 40k historically because there are so many countries and so many like a concentration of strong players. Of course, the United States has a very strong scene as well, but these lists have been performing very strongly in Europe. They've been knocking on the door of the meta since the end of last year. Things like Poxwalker Farm, things like Tyranids, they have been there, right? So why is it such a surprise to GW that the metagame has evolved to the point that Matt Root could take down the Eldar kind of dominated meta with his Nids, and alongside that kind of chaos, large unit, Poxwalker spam type of army that Nick Nanavati also had a lot of success with? Why is this a surprise to GW? Why is that slowing down their FAQ? So what I'm kind of saying is GW should have known this. They should have known, and this should have already been part of their FAQ. So what I'm proposing is perhaps GW smashed the absolute, daylights out of Eldar in their FAQ. Maybe they were hitting things like, like what's it called? The big Space Marine flyer, the Forge World flyer. Maybe they're hitting things like around the edges, and they don't realize that they've missed the big villains of the current evolved part of the meta. So I think that GW really need to, if they're going to have this system, they need to be more involved with the metagame. They need people telling them, and they need that interaction where they know what's going on so they don't get blindsided by the results of a tournament that really shouldn't have been that controversial. So why else is it a problem that FAQs are being delayed? Well, firstly, it's a problem because now it's even harder to plan around. I mean, when you're being told, okay, an FAQ is coming out in a certain month, well, that's okay because you kind of think, well, all right, well, now I know that if I've got a tournament that's coming up in August or in May, I guess I'll wait for March and then I'll buy my models or I'll start working on my list. Well, you can't really do that when it's a whole season. If they're kind of saying, okay, we're going to have a spring FAQ and an autumn FAQ, well, that's not acceptable really. If this is a one-off kind of delay, okay, fair enough. But if this is just them slightly adjusting their schedule and giving themselves bigger windows, I don't think that's acceptable, okay? And the reason I don't think it's acceptable is because it's very difficult to plan around. It makes it really hard for TOs, and it just makes it hard for competitive players or even kind of pseudo-competitive players to emotionally commit to a hobby project if they don't know whether that army is going to be good in a couple of weeks. So if for example, there is this autumn FAQ, potentially the next one. Well, I mean, how do we deal with it? Like, does that mean that if you've got an army, like you start playing Tau and in the metagame, maybe like Storm Surges start being good? I don't know, like who knows? Does that mean you kind of don't commit to that tournament because you're worried that maybe you'll get nerfed in the FAQ, maybe your list will change? It's just, I think these kind of things, because they're so meta-defining, these FAQs, they need to be very rigorously planned. And GW needs to show that level of responsibility when it comes to delivering them. They don't need to be delivered by 5 a.m. on a certain date. Like there's not like, it's not a business. It's not like a business meeting. You're not going to get fired. We can't fire GW, but we can kind of say to them, look guys, it is affecting our list building. It is affecting the way in which we can conceptualize lists. It's making it hard for TOs because players are putting pressure on TOs. When are we going to lock in the FAQ? When's the FAQ going to no longer be valid? When is it going to be valid? It just makes it hard. So I think we certainly need GW to be a little bit more timely going forward. And that links to my next point where I said it can paralyze gamers because, and I'm feeling that at the moment. A lot of people in my community are feeling it. There's a big tournament in Australia called Terracon that happens in June. And June's a while away, but people are waiting for this FAQ before they start preparing. Because what's the point of going and investing in an Eldar army or a Tyranid army or a Poxwalker army, any of the top of the meta lists, if they can just get destroyed in an FAQ? So I really think that, it is important for GW to be more timely. Lastly, the last kind of thing to say is that at the end of the day, the top players, the players that are taking down events, your Nick Nanavardis, your Matt Roots, they're not the ones getting hurt by this FAQ system. They are not victims of this system. Yes, their lists are getting nerfed, but these guys are guys that are pivoting straight into the next part of the meta. They're defining the meta. They're the ones at the front, right? Like they're trailblazing through this front of the meta regardless of the FAQ. So the FAQ is not going to hurt them because as soon as the FAQ drops, these players, I like to consider myself one of those players, will instantly adjust, will instantly find the new source of power, will instantly predict the way the meta is going to shift and turn up to the next tournament and take it down. The problem, so you're never going to get ahead of these players. And the delay of this FAQ represents GW trying to get ahead, right? They've kind of said, oh, Flyrants are really good now. Okay, well, we have to nerf Flyrants. We have to get ahead of the Flyrants. Well, you can't get ahead of the Flyrants because these guys have moved on to the next thing. Maybe we need Flyrants to stay strong in the meta to combat the next meta adjustment. So at the end of the day, I really think GW need to adopt a less interventionalist approach. That doesn't mean they shouldn't release these FAQs. The FAQs are necessary because what they do is allow GW to give a sense of clarity to the game and answer questions that need to be answered, make adjustments that need to be made. But I feel like there's a sense of, strong intervention and strong meta kind of like wanting to change the meta that is not necessary. And just the parting thought is just like, think about something like Dark Reapers. Think about how much they were annoying people, how much they were at the tip of everyone's tongues. Everyone was raging about them a couple of months ago. In the Adepticon meta, they really weren't that influential at all. The meta changed around Dark Reapers. Dark Reapers might be bad for another 2 or 3 months in the meta before they come back. No nerf was necessary in that sense. That doesn't mean they shouldn't get a minor nerf, but I think that GW was going to absolutely destroy them, and then they realized that they had egg on their face with that FAQ that was about to drop, because they were going to be blowing their wad on nerfing Dark Reapers and Shining Spears and things like that when those units weren't even influential in a top tournament. Guys, that's my thoughts. I know I was a little bit passionate there, but I really think that, the good people behind the screens at GW, they need help. Like, there only might be a small team. As a community, we need to give them constructive feedback. We shouldn't be afraid to do that. But the important part about constructive feedback is to not just criticize, it's to give solutions. And I think a solution here is for them to be more involved in the meta, liaise and discuss with the people that are taking down tournaments, get their opinion, and just try to, be a little bit less heavy-handed with the FAQs. Anyway, guys, thanks for that. I'll see you next time in my next video. Cheers.